Hello, everyone. Welcome back to your last best hope for conversation, a Babylon 5 podcast. It has been a while. We have had holidays, illness, travel, all kinds of exciting things. Let's blame it on the Vorlon. But
Always.
I am back. My name is Jesse. Joining me in the CNC is Lou.
Hello, everyone. Happy tax day to my American brothers.
Ugh.
Absolutely, yes. And Karen.
Hello, everyone. Why'd you gotta go and say that now?
We
Happy
have it
belated Easter.
We have it in 2 weeks. We have the end till the end of the month.
Oh.
Yes, so we have been gone. I'm excited. You guys been doing okay?
Yes,
Yeah.
sir. Yep, the
Good.
snow is gone. Spring has come.
Yay. I was just telling Lou before we hit record that yesterday on Friday, as we're recording this is Sunday morning, Lynn and I went down to Central Texas and spent some time among the Bluebonnets. And I posted some photos on Facebook. If you are not familiar, Bluebonnets is a wildflower that's native to Texas, and it is absolutely beautiful. The fields around Ennis and Brennan, Texas, they are just acres of wildflowers that are.
It's also a Texas ice cream.
Yes, it is,
which is very good.
Wow.
We went to Bluebell where they make it, and on Saturday morning, we were only 10 minutes away. We were heading to A&M. We were going to tour the George Bush, the older George Bush's presidential library. And we went to, and they were closed. They're only open Monday through Fridays.
Of course.
It's a museum and a tour and the shop. And so we did get a couple of pictures. They have a statue of the young girl pulling the cow, which is their label. And
right.
That was pretty fun.
Yeah, the reason I know that, it's not just some weird fact. I used to live in Austin. I lived in Austin for a couple of years. So that's how I know that.
Yes, Bluebell is very well-known ice cream.
You said you went down to Central Texas. Is that not actually up?
Nope, it's down.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
You see, I'm in Dallas, Texas, which is north. I'm almost in Oklahoma. Dallas is only an hour away from Oklahoma.
I thought Dallas was kind of in the middle. But...
Houston's over there.
Yeah.
San Antonio's over there.
Yeah. Houston's close to the Gulf, or closer to the Gulf.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Now that we've had our geography lesson.
Yep.
Divided Loyalties. This is the 19th episode of season 2. There was a little bit of discussion because this and the next episode, which is the Long Twilight Struggle, is in different orders. If you watch it on Tubi, I believe this is the order on the DVD set.
Yes.
Yep.
Divided Loyalties.
So that's what we're going with first. Originally came out October 11th, 1995. Lyta Alexander returns to the station with news that one of the officers on the station is an undercover operative. Dun dun. So it was very good from my perspective to see Lita return. I'm really curious to hear what you guys think of this one. Karen, let's start with you.
Okay, probably the first time since I've been watching this that I was genuinely shocked by a turn that happened in this episode. I didn't see this coming at all. But I think this episode, it was really good. It was nice to see Patricia Tallman back. And it was a great episode. There were little funny beats in it and then some serious stuff. And I liked the balance in this episode. And we also did get a little bit of a reveal that I did suspect. So that's cool as well. And then something I mentioned about Kosh in
almost came true.
Almost came true. And it happened again in this episode.
Yeah, because last episode you were just railing that you wanted to know who he was.
And I did notice also when he appeared that other time and something had happened, there were flapping sounds, and it happened again in this episode. So like a bird flapping. So.
Very nice. All right, Lou, how about you?
I think I never wanted to punch Garibaldi in the face more than I ever did in this episode. When he had his air quotes moment, I thought, you son of a bitch.
Yeah.
Excuse my French. But like Karen, I was shocked by the episode, but my first thought was, I guess behind the scenes, the actor that plays Talia didn't want to stay on the show anymore, because I had no other explanation as to why this event would occur when it did in this context of the series. And I have a quibble with the whole conceit of this episode, but we'll get into that as we dive into it deeper. But yeah, this was just quite a shock, and it just felt like, okay, we got to do this. Let's do it now. Episode.
Good. We'll talk more about that when we get into deeper. Behind the scenes, they had said that JMS has been that, Andrea Thompson, who played Talia, was looking for more screen time. She wanted more stories. And he had explained to her that this is a novel and it is what it is. There isn't, for example, on Happy Days, I just finished reading Ron Howard and Cliff Howard's. They wrote a book about their childhood experiences acting, and Ron Howard talked about that. He was happy because he really liked Henry Winkler, but he was unhappy that his screen time started diminishing because the Fonz character got so popular. But the writers could change. He understood as a creative person why. In this case, that you can't do that. At least JMS says you couldn't, because he's got a story to tell, and it is what it is. So he ended up doing this, and there was a little twist involved that we'll get into later on why he ended up doing this story the way he did it when he did. Lita comes back. I agree with you. I was very happy to see her again. Patricia is, I know because I've seen the rest of the series, she comes back as a regular down the road. He is who JMS always wanted her to be, the telepath on the series. So he was happy that he was able to get her back. And she comes back with big news that someone is a sleeper spy. Karen, let's start with you. Give me some thoughts and go for whenever you want to go.
Okay. Yeah. I'm not shocked that there was a sleeper spy. That was always, it's always kind of something in spy stories, that there's going to be some twist that someone's on the inside. And we know that because of I'm not going to go too much into it, because of something that happens in the next episode, things are really ramping up when it comes to all the different elements and things that might not be related, but things are really happening. And
yeah, by the way, I want to pause you. We broke our rule because of the way the different systems, where the order came. We ended up watching both of them, and we're going to talk about next week's episode after we finish this one. Yes.
Yeah. That completely my fault. I didn't even think about it being out of order on Tubi, and I watched the next episode first. So that's why we're doing it this way. I completely understand why it's in this order on the DVD. This is definitely the correct order of things. And okay, so Lita comes back, and again, I was pleased to see her. We hadn't seen her since the pilot. And I also like that we got a flashback to the pilot. We got to see little bits and pieces of it in the description of who she was and why she was back, because Franklin had never met her. That was interesting. And we also got an explanation as to why they were called. They were just recalled after that. And I was assuming it had something to do with Kosh. But whether we get that explanation or not, it's immaterial. So she comes back. She has this news that someone is like a sleeper agent for Psychor. And again, we suspected that the Psychor had something sinister going on. And now that again has been revealed. And that Lita she's found out some stuff and she's decided that she's not going to put up with it anymore. And in this way, I think that where Talia and Susan were starting to become friends, I see that maybe we could get that with Lita, because Lita and Susan have kind of something in common, that they're both disillusioned and unhappy with what Psychor does. We also got the reveal that, yes, Susan is a latent telepath. And that was something that I had theorized, and you guys had theorized as well. I think it wasn't a shock, but it was cool to see it realized, to see her going to her friend Sheridan and telling him, I haven't been truthful with you. This is happening. And he completely understands. That's the good part about their relationship. He says, okay, I get it. We'll just have to work around it because we need to find out who the sleeper agent is. And I like that it was just a complete fluke that they found that Talia was a sleeper agent, because she just happened to be there. And it was such a turn that actress made in that minute. She comes in, oh, hi, you found me out. It was really cool to see that, and the interaction and how betrayed everyone felt. And I'm assuming especially Susan, since they were becoming friends. And I think
Friends with benefits?
Maybe it looked like it was going to go there, right?
I think they just didn't show it, but they
Yeah,
left it open to interpretation.
You think?
I think there are plenty of people, and I think when we get to our feedback, there are plenty of people that go, no, they didn't feel, they weren't together. Other people, I absolutely think they did feel together. I could argue either way. I personally think, yes, they connected together. He wanted to leave that vague. But I do think it was really an emotional moment for Susan in so many other ways. Go ahead. Anything else, Karen, before we let Lou share?
Not a lot more. Like you said, I did want to pop Garibaldi in the nose. I thought it was funny too. It's definitely a Garibaldi prank. And I felt like maybe Sheridan was going, why I oughta, that kind of.
Yep.
And yeah. And there were a lot of little beats of Garibaldi in this. Should we sing Kumbaya? And him doing the prank. And he was talking to Zach. So we also got a little bit of the what's going on with the armbands, and So we got a lot of stuff. I feel like a lot of stuff was packed into this episode, but it's still a mystery. So again, very good episode. And I'm not summing it up here. I'm just saying at least that part of it, the traitor within kind of episode was very cool.
Good. Lou, how about you?
Yeah, I'll echo everything that Karen said pretty well, and then I'll just springboard off of that and turn to my issues with the episode.
Please.
The first thing is, again, because with the telepaths, we don't know, the rules haven't been set fully yet, so we don't know the context of everything that's going on here. How could what's Lita, how could she withstand intensive interrogation from more powerful telepaths for 2 years and not give up the goods? I don't understand how that's possible. And if Susan is a latent telepath, she probably was maybe subconsciously blocking any attempts from any telepath to read her mind. So why didn't Bester or anybody else say, I cannot totally read her at all? Whereas with other people, I assume they could pick up errant stray thoughts and like that. So that was bothering me as well. And then the whole let's use the trigger password so that we will wipe out this person and replace them with this other personality. That's basically murder. Like, why wouldn't they just say, let's see if we can find who's got the password trigger in their brain and not trigger it? But I assume that GMS was just making sure that there was no way back for this actor to come back to the show, because they totally wiped out a character that we've come to quite enjoy. And I still prefer Talia to Lita. I just think she's a better actor. And I think she handled that moment brilliantly. But as an actor, if I would have gotten that scene, I would have been pretty upset, because it's basically like a mental abortion, I guess you could say, in a way. It just really bothered me that there was not even any discussion in the episode about, instead of triggering it, let's just identify it or find it instead of triggering it, because you could have played that to your advantage too. But they did what they did, and so you have to live with it. And I just have to reiterate that, I have trouble with when they don't give you the proper context for these things. And I know the listeners are going to say, well, that's the way the show is, you either have to accept it or whatnot, and blah blah blah. But I just think it causes unnecessary, it breaks the, what do you call that, the
fourth wall,
not the fourth wall, the suspension of disbelief. Because if your universe is not consistent in its rules, then it takes you out of it, and you have to try to figure out, this happened in this episode, maybe telepaths can really do this, but no, in that other episode they did it the opposite, so maybe they can't really do this. So that's what the central conceit of this episode, I struggled with it, and I really didn't like the fact that there was no discussion about not triggering the lock, the trigger at all. So from that perspective, I didn't like it. But again, all the actors did a really good job with the parts that they had to play. As I said, Garibaldi, I really wanted to punch him in the face, because on Babylon 5, he could have been. And I thought, no, I don't want to lose that character. But so it's interesting that going forward, we'll have to see how Lita plays into the show again as well. She's trying to get to Vorlon territory, so that's also interesting, and what ramifications that has going forward, I don't know. And would the Vorlon even want her to come to their territory? Like, what would they do with her? I don't know. And so we'll have to see how it all plays out. It was unexpected episode because of the reasons I mentioned off the top of the show.
Yeah, and would she want what's what she would get if she went to the Vorlon space. What is her motivation there?
Yeah.
So
Oh,
there's both directions.
yeah. And one more thing with Talia, and I don't know if it's clear or not because they called it a latent personality. Is that her real personality? The Talia personality that we saw was the fake one, or is it the other way around? And if it is Talia, if the real personality was overtaken by the latent personality, I find it hard to believe that her real personality would not struggle to come back in some form, and maybe Lita could have helped her to try to reestablish her original personality or whatever. So that there was that aspect of it as well. But,
Yeah, a couple of things. I do think it would have been interesting to have a statement going, is there a way that we can determine this without triggering it? Would have been a good line. In my mind, I think this is they think it's just someone playing a role. I don't think they understood how, even though Lita said that it would be wake up, this other personality wouldn't have destroyed the original personality, is what I thought. I don't think they knew the bomb they were triggering is so the reason why. And all they're thinking about is what we need to do. I do think it's interesting that after the trigger, she remembers everything because she talked about all the times when you guys were talking and I was going, oh, why? I couldn't stand her. So that's in my mind how Talia and then new Talia, they did not realize how drastic this was going to be. Don't know if that helps any at all, but that's in my mind how I do it. And then the discussion about, because that's where a lot of people go, they didn't sleep together because there's no way, because they talk about when telepaths make love, it's this sharing of senses. I wonder if that's a step down the road, right? Maybe when you become more and more intimate on a more regular basis, you go to that next step. I don't know. And maybe in my mind, Talia would know how fragile Susan is and how afraid she is about telepaths. She would resisted trying to mentally go into her because there's things in intimacy that difference between love is spit or swallow. Okay, there. I went blue. So there are things that you won't do. And so maybe that was her mind. That's in my mind, is how we did that. Apologize for going a little dirty there, people.
Yeah, like a difference between the one night stand and a relationship.
And it raises if they did spend the night together, then there's no way that Talia could not find out that Susan was a latent telepath, because I'm sure she would still have her defenses up.
Yeah.
I think that would just be instinctive. I don't think even if she was in love with this, if they were in love, I still think that would take time for her to lower her defenses. So that's a good argument for the people that say that they didn't sleep together.
And I don't think they did. I think they got close, but I don't think they did.
Yeah. Second base, maybe?
Maybe.
Sure.
Okay. I also think because she says she's not even a P1, a T1, that it's so latent. You guys did suspect that Susan did have this telepathic ability. So did you guys both feel good about that?
Yep. Yes.
Yeah. Good guess. I think so. To give you a little background, and I don't know if this is the right place, but we'll just go ahead. In the pilot, the second in command she was going to be, and they ended up losing her. What was that? Looking up the character's name, and our listeners are yelling at the player going, of course. The Laurel. Lieutenant Commander Laura Takamichi. She was second in command. She was the one who was supposed to shoot Garibaldi. And then she was supposed to be the one that they turned. And then the Corwin character would have been this young lieutenant commander from Russia, Susan Ivanova. And then she would have moved up into that role. That originally was in his mind how this was going to play.
So this was planned out even before the first episode. Okay.
Yeah, that the Laurel, the second in command, was going to be at this point they would change, and that then she would leave the series, and then Claudia Christian would step up and have a bigger role.
Okay. So
one of the things that JMS said is there had been leaks and people theory that, okay, and setting the trap that Susan's afraid of being scanned, that was subconsciously her knowing, oh, I'm going to be betrayed. And so by having, everyone's like, oh, okay, it was supposed to be the second in command. We have the second in command. Now then she's the one that we're going to turn. And by having her not turn and having the resident telepath change, caught a lot of people by surprise. It's the same way it did you guys. So yes, and if this was the double purpose, Lou, the actress was ready to leave. So he gave her a juicy one. And then maybe subconsciously, oh, you don't want to be on the show? I'll make it so you can't ever come back.
Sure.
Because we're all human. So that's where that came from. I do think it was, I loved how they showed everyone kind of bored with people walking in and then Talia, nope, not them. I just want to tell you you're doing a good job. Okay. I thought that was played with a little bit of humor. I agree with you guys that Garibaldi was a jerk. That's not funny.
I think it was funny, but still a jerk.
Yes. And then we find out that she is, our version of Talia is gone all the time. And so you wonder where they're going to go. And I like how they all were, holy crap, we were just going to put her in and we just missed that. Any thoughts on the rest of this storyline?
I didn't suspect until the very minute that she was given the wake word that it was going to be Talia. So when they were discussing letting her in on it, I thought to myself, she's not in on it already? She did that whole thing with Bester and all this. And I honestly thought that she was already in on it. But now I know why they introduced that as a, hey, remember, she's not in on it kind of thing.
It's a nice misdirect too.
Yeah, it was super nice misdirect. Yeah, that was a nice piece of storytelling there right at the beginning.
Oh, by the way, according to IMDb, and the internet is never wrong, the series storyline was intended to have her personality restored by Kosh using psychic data collected in the subplot of Babylon 5 Deathwalker. However, with Thompson's exit, they abandoned that plot point. So there was a chance that with Kosh's magical abilities, they could have done that. I thought that was interesting. So they could have had that back. That's good. Let's talk about Kosh being there and the whole idea of Lita coming back seems to have a connection to the Vorlons and Kosh. She and the doctor from the pilot are the only two people that in this series have seen what a Vorlon looks like. Let's start with you, Lou, on that storyline.
It just further puts a exclamation mark on Karen's wish in mind that we find out who exactly Kosh is, because what's the deal with this dude? And I still think he's a future version of one of the characters that's in the show, but we'll see how that plays out. And it just the more we deal with Kosh, it just keeps reminding me of the Medusa and the Bastard from the Is There in Truth No Beauty original Star Trek episode, where they have the alien inside the box and Spock goes insane because he forgets to put the visor on, blah blah blah. But it's got that vibe. But obviously here we don't have anybody going insane from seeing who Kosh is inside the suit. It does make me wonder, though, what happened to the doctor that saw him. They must have been able to find out from him, because he would have no mental shielding or anything about what he saw. But maybe if Kosh, like you said, they were going to use him as a backdoor to restore Talia's mind, maybe he left the doctor with a different memory of what he saw than what he actually saw. So I suppose they could have can get around it with that bit of writing as well. Yeah, I just don't know when the moment is that we're going to get the big reveal for Kosh. He's like the observers from the Fringe TV series. So I'm just hoping that we won't be disappointed when we find out exactly what he's all about.
Okay, good. Karen?
Yeah, I'm going insane. I use my husband as the sounding board, and he stays very stoic and silent.
You're triggered, Karen. You're triggered.
Yep, that's my wake word, Kosh. One thing, piggybacking on what Lou said, is that even Lita couldn't really describe what she had seen and heard with Kosh. She was having a hard time verbalizing it. And I think maybe the doctor didn't even have that much. He saw something, but it was obscured, and maybe, I'm sure it was because of Kosh's abilities. But if he doesn't want someone to know who he is, he's not going to let them know who he is. And that's just what I assumed. Again, I'm reading into it, but Lita did mention that she had a hard time even verbalizing what she felt and saw and all that when she read Kosh. And Garibaldi did say that she wasn't the same afterwards. So it is that I went a little nuts when I saw what's in the box. Sorry, I had to do that. So she has some kind of revelation, something that has changed her. And I think it's a very spiritual kind of thought. And so I'm leaning more towards that Kosh is the spiritual entity of some kind. And again, I have no idea. I was talking to Sean, and I would say to Sean, I'm really wondering what's inside Kosh. Don't say anything.
Well, Karen, here's a tidbit that I just, reading the episode summary that I think was a slip by whoever wrote this, because they talk about the scene where Lita's talking and asks Kosh if he can see their true form again. And they use the plural, their true form, instead of his or its. I don't know if that's a slip or not. Jesse's probably biting his tongue right now, but we shall see.
Or if it's just a pronoun. Is a pronoun just a pronoun? Who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah. The more we get into this, I feel like we're getting more and more hints, and I'm more and more upset that I don't know. So I feel like we should be getting more. We get more and more hints. We should be becoming more and more satisfied with what we're getting. I'm not. I want to know what's going on with him, what is inside of him. They've dropped hints, but they're so vague with their hints. And I did like that interaction between Lita and Kosh there near the end. And I feel like she was telling the truth when she said I couldn't really verbalize what I saw or felt. And I think maybe that's why they couldn't get stuff out of her when she went to get read or she was tortured or whatever, because she just couldn't really verbalize it or put it into words or even make it a full feeling. And I think maybe that interaction with him not only changed her personality wise, but changed her fortitude. And that kind of bolstered her, that she had seen something divine and therefore couldn't be corrupted at that point. Again, I'm reading into it, but who knows? And I do say that a lot when I talk to Sean, because of course he's seen the entire series, and I say, look, here's what I think. Don't say anything. So yeah, he and I talked about it extensively yesterday. And when I say he and I say, I mean me. And he did mention a few things, but not spoilers. I know that things are getting ramped up.
Right.
There's no, and so I would say, I assume things are really getting ramped up on all these fronts. And he goes, yeah, you know that already though. So there's things like that. But when it comes to Kosh, I literally tell him when I'm asking about it, please don't say anything. But man, do I want to know what is going on. And he did tell me that, and I guess I shouldn't share this, but he did tell me that we don't have a huge wait to find out. So he didn't specify. He just said it's coming soon, so you don't have to stress about it.
Again, and people are getting tired of me going back to the original Star Trek, but I have a feeling that Kosh is some sort of evolved form of or future form of humans where they don't need physical bodies anymore, much like the Organians from the No Errand of Mercy episode from Star Trek.
A being of pure light.
The pure energy.
Yeah.
So you may want to cut this out, Lou, when you're editing, but just this was a funny note. I got a message on one of the other podcasts I do with my buddy Sylvan, is we're doing every John Hiatt song in alphabetical order. And someone on our Facebook page sent a very nice message saying, I just found the podcast. I really love it. I discovered John's music years ago. He's one of my favorite artists. I think you guys do a great discussion. I am not a fan of Bruce Springsteen, and I find it irritating that you keep bringing up Bruce Springsteen as you're discussing John
So
Hiatt.
we're talking about the bingo card now, right?
Yeah.
And we shared that feedback on our last recording, and I don't know if anyone listening is an NBA fan, but often in the NBA, when the ref calls a foul, you'll see the player raise their hand going, yep, that's on me. So I raised my hand to, his name was John. Yep, that's on me. I can't help it. It is just in my ingrained. So we recorded 2 episodes this past Wednesday. The first one I specifically did not mention a Bruce, and Sylvan was laughing at me because there was one that was so obvious, the mixture. And then I told him, but the reason why is they're both great songwriters. And so one reminds me of the other. So I think the same thing, Lou, that Star Trek is in our DNA. Yeah. And I believe that the original series, especially, was a huge inspiration to JMS. He had said that the original Twilight Zone, Outer Limits, original Star Trek were all 3 big influences to him. So therefore, he needed that. He wanted to share that. So yeah, great.
Cool.
Yep. We got, I think, 4 squares done.
Okay, great.
So far. If we're counting the fact that you just mentioned Bruce Springsteen.
Exactly.
Does that count?
Yes, it does. Yes, it
Okay,
does.
Kosh questions.
Yeah,
Bruce
there we go.
Springsteen, Star Trek, and I almost said Sinclair instead of Sheridan. I'm going to count that. And we didn't complain about Franklin, so we didn't mark that box off. But
no, we didn't. Is there?
Oh, we have the Sheridan, the Lynn universe today kiosk moment, which I found quite humorous.
I was going to bring that. Let's talk about that.
Quarters or whatever.
Yes. Yeah. I thought that was really funny, right? That you would just send that, and it is very ahead of its time, right? The idea that you would send this, I think, was pretty interesting. And she has to get the gossip, right? She's talking about she's so much better. And then, of course, no, I've got to know what's going on. I thought that was a nice little moment.
Yeah. Right? I would love to see that kind of thing, that you have to recycle your paper before you get a new one. I thought that was awesome, bringing up some issues that need to be addressed, but in a kind of a funny way, that you get a credit for the next paper if you recycle your paper. And I'm assuming that's because they can reuse that material over and over again. And I loved that Delenn was talking about how she has this disdain for how humans love gossip, and then when she's outed, she comes out and says, okay, yeah, I like to see what's going on. And that was a cute little note between the two of them. I also was excited to see that opener because it meant we were going to get Delenn in this episode, because they wouldn't just put Delenn in the opener. They don't do that. They don't use a character right at the beginning and then don't use them in the rest of the episode. So I love Delenn. I love Mira Furlan, and to see her in this episode and how we can see that she is trusted by people. That says a lot about her character, that Lita knew immediately, here's someone I can go to that has influence and I trust her. And the fact that she did a reading for Delenn early on in her tenure on Babylon 5, I'm assuming she got that message that Delenn could be trusted. And that, I thought that was a great little piece of story. It just goes along with our thoughts about Delenn, and that she may have some ulterior motives, but they're not bad. I'd like to think she's a good guy. And so that kind of reinforces that. And the fact that she and Sheridan have that kind of banter going on, I think that's cool. And I do that she was pulled into this as a conduit between Lita and Sheridan. So just overall, a good cold open. And then the fact that she was used later on to be that sort of serious part of being the dependable, trusted companion kind of thing. I guess ambassador, not companion, but you know what I'm saying.
I do think that Delenn and Sheridan are getting stronger. They seem to be connecting a lot. I like this idea of them being I shipped them originally when I was watching this. I do think it's part. Any thoughts, anything else you thought about them involving?
How about you, Lou?
Yeah.
Despite chuckling about the whole universe today kiosk, which just seems so antiquated.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
But I did like the scene because it showed that Delenn has regrets about her decisions, and she feels isolated from her people, and she's having to regress to using. I don't know with the universe today how reputable it is. I don't know. It hasn't been established whether it's a left-leaning or a right-leaning publication, or if it's neutral, which would be surprising, but we'll see. But it's just funny that we know that she's cut off from her people now, and so she's desperate to get any source of information about them. She also subscribes to the I and Mabari, which is interesting. Yeah, I really like it from that aspect, and I do like their relationship, but I have to keep circling back to the previous commander, Sinclair, who also seemed to have a connection with her as well. And going back to that episode where they went to Babylon 4, and she showed up at some point, we believe, in that episode as well. It'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. And yeah, I think that's about it. They're good together. I do like that. I guess the only other big question I have about this episode is Babylon 5 doesn't have a telepath anymore. So who's going to fill that role, or are they going to fill that role?
Yeah, good question. Anything else that we need to talk about in this episode?
Garibaldi.
Yeah.
I still like him. I'm
if I was
sorry.
Sheridan, I think I would have lost it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great.
I think he might have had more of a reaction if it was just the two of them in the room.
Maybe.
But
Yeah.
And I think I am really liking Zach, the character of Zach. I love that they give him these little pieces in these episodes that are meaningful, maybe hint drops, but very kind of brief. I think he's a good actor. Or he was, sorry. R.I.P.
No, yeah, I think it is. And during our trip, we are listening to Rachel Maddow's podcast Ultra, which is about right during the 40s, a lot of conservative American first societies and groups were very pro Germany and anti-US getting into the war. And Linda and I asked the question, how could anyone support the Nazi party? And I'm like, it starts out with, I don't want Americans to go to war and die. And I think, Zach, they're paying me $50 extra to do my job. And we see, okay, this is not a good thing. But from his perspective, it's just an extra 200 credits a month to do what he would do anyway. Hey, if they're dumb enough to do this, I'm doing it.
Right. Yeah, he doesn't see that there might be other motivations.
Yeah.
He just thinks they're dumb.
Yeah. I find it hard to believe that Garibaldi's going along with that. In real world scenarios, we've seen at any time where somebody's doing a favor for somebody or reporting to two bosses, there's going to be conflict of interest. It's unavoidable. Yeah. I'm seeing from a story perspective what they're doing here, but from a realistic perspective, I just don't agree with this whole storyline at all.
Although there are policemen, and we're going on the fact that they're the police in this story. There are policemen that don't make enough money, and so they take like a security guard job at night. Right. And where those might conflict, no one can say you can't do it if it's not interfering with your job. So there might be that kind of thing happening, that Garibaldi doesn't see it as harmless, but he can't really tell him, you can't make this extra money.
But but the issue there is those two roles are separated. They don't overlap. So if he wants to wear this night watch thing when he's off duty,
okay. I get it.
Okay, but when you're in uniform, you can't have conflicting corporate entities on being displayed in public, because people will look at that and say, what the hell is this? Who is this guy?
And how much of that is pressure from the Earth government too, to allow that kind of thing? I mean, there's lots of questions around it. Why is Garibaldi allowing? He knows that it's bad news. Garibaldi is 100% sure this is bad news. So there has to be some kind of underlying reason, or it's just a plot hole. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We did get the flashback of one of Sheridan's visions where Susan says, do you know, she has the crow on her shoulder and says, do you know who I am, or something along that line. They gave foreshadowing, paid off, so that's good. Any final thoughts before we get to ratings?
No, I think
okay.
I've gotten everything in that I wanted to say.
Okay. All right. Lou, you want to start us off?
Probably giving this a little bit higher rating than I normally would, just because of the shock value of what happened in this episode. So I'm going to give this 8 kumbayas.
Ah, nice. Karen?
Yeah, I think I'll give it the same. 8 recycled papers.
Okay.
Why they would be reading papers? Like actual physical papers still.
Yeah, it is. But remember, in the original Star Trek, right? Kirk had to, because he had it printed out once, or maybe that was one of the novels I read, because he that feeling of that.
I can forgive that more because that was done in the 60s. Yeah. This was in the 90s. The internet was already around. There was already news online. So I would hope that they would extrapolate that we're going to get our news online.
Yeah.
But I do understand that to have the paper actually allowed that scene to happen. Because if they were just reading it online, they wouldn't have to come together at this little kiosk thing.
And they would have.
There's a curious lack of tablets.
Right?
And there is, right, yes. Yeah. Yes, and it's nice to know that there's still the World Series happening. I am going to give this a little bit higher, 8.5 out of 10 sleepovers.
I have a question for you, Jesse.
Yes.
Because you are the veteran here and you knew this moment was coming, how was it for you going back through these episodes, knowing what was going to happen to Talia in this episode? Did you look at her character any differently than we would have?
I did a little bit because I did know this was coming. Mm-hmm. I also felt I was a little more sensitive to any time that Susan and Talia were together, looking for signs that their relationship is going forward.
Right.
Because I'm a romantic, I do think that there was intimacy involved, and maybe they did not make the final step, but it was getting close. Mm-hmm. I also feel, as I'm watching this, I knew that this was coming as a heartbreak to Susan, and it makes me a little bit sad because what I knew was coming, the idea that she's opening up her very secluded shell, right? She doesn't let people in very easy. And to see her doing that knows that this is going to make it tough even more in the future for her to connect with someone. So that's where I read with it. Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yes. Any feedback, Karen, didn't we get from Texas a la Shock? This was a long time ago, so
yeah, I was looking and I didn't see anything.
Okay, let me check on my new PC. I may not be able to pull it. I know that it was there.
I have the last one I have is Confessions and Lamentations.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't remember copying us on any emails. Just
okay. All right. While I'm checking, do you want to give us some
YouTube?
YouTube? Yes.
Sure. So it's always a little difficult to go back a couple of weeks, and the comments here are attached to episode 18, but I think a lot of them are referring to the previous episode 17. And this is, we're going back to this whole thing with sorry, Brian, come here. Mr. Didaland says, one thing mentioned in the show that has possible implications. Dr. Lazarine said Draffa was centuries ago, possibly 1,000 years ago. The fact that it was an isolated island suggests to me that it was a biological weapons test, and the war ended before it could be used on the rest of the rest. And then he says, Lynn is dealing with an emotional trauma that would be rough on anyone, much less someone still dealing with emerging human emotions. By the way, the reason it was called the Spanish flu was due to the fact that Spain didn't restrict the information about deaths. Almost all other countries in Europe didn't report it due to World War I censorship. In fact, people studying it seem to think it started at Camp Funston,
Kansas.
Okay, and spread through the U.S. and Europe from there. Oh, interesting.
Yep.
I didn't know that. Then I guess we're getting into the dinner that they prepared for Sheridan. Lynn and Lenier share the look they share when speaking Minbari after Sheridan leaves from the meal. I gather that it is something along the lines of Lenier making an unfavorable comment about Sheridan. Why did he have to be so disrespectful? While Lynn was probably defensive. He's a human who's unfamiliar with our ways. We should give him some slack. Interesting. Then we got again Mr. Deland talking about that scene with Morden and Veer, and he's talking about the finger scene. He says that it's what's the finger? It is the finger, but I haven't seen it, so I don't know. Maybe my DVD's not framed properly. I don't know, but we'll have to see.
I thought someone sent a screen cap, and I thought I'd sent it to you guys. I did not. I mean, I guess so. It was not as blatant as I thought. I get it, but yeah.
Okay. Simon says, I don't think he liked the flarn. Your flarn isn't very good. Okay.
Okay.
It took me ages to make that flarn. That flarn has a soggy bottom. No Paul Hollywood handshake for Linier.
That's right.
And then this is important that I wasn't aware of. The phrase faith manages is to Babylon 5's what live long and prosper, I aim to misbehave, and may the force be with you is to fans of other science fiction universes. Interesting. Faith manages.
Yes.
And then there's more talk about the Black Death in Ireland. Some personal Jim Norton trivia. He was in the same class in school with my dad in Stinge Street in Dublin. Quite a high proportion of actors, artists, and musicians came from this school, in spite of the best efforts of the Christian Brothers to keep extracurricular activities to manly games. On this episode, I don't think I can bring myself to watch it again anytime soon. So much Babylon 5, it is unbearably prescient. And I guess that's a COVID inference, maybe? I'm not sure.
What, prescient?
No, yeah, I know what prescient means, but I don't know
why
it is
that it's hard to watch because of current. Yeah.
Regarding Lynn and Nathan says, regarding Lynn and Lenny are going to tend to the sick, it's not out of the blue. In the first season, human telepath girl was choosing where to go, and Lynn told her that Minbari telepaths have no possessions. Other people give everything to them because telepaths go to serve people, and serving is the highest obligation Minbari have. That's a good callback, Nathan, and I could totally get behind that. He says he agrees with me, but my criticism intersect with his in a different part of the problem. There should have been more Minbari going in and helping without Lynn and Lenny going there. Looks very rarely indeed. I don't know if there was budget constraints or JMS just didn't think of it. That's also a good point. Skyfire 2020, thank you for having a legible YouTube or user internet handle. I can't remember the quote, but JMS once compared the show to an event where Harlan Ellison was writing a story and putting each page on a wall before starting the next page. Oh, yes. He did a promotional event, Harlan Ellison, where he basically sat in the front store of a window of a bookstore and just wrote stories for in public. So that's pretty cool.
He mentions that in this Lurker's Guide to this episode. He mentions that that's the closest as I'm writing this story, I'm writing a novel. I can't go back and change it. So therefore, one of the reasons why that, possibly Talia wouldn't come back. And of course, now then we heard the other rumor is they were going to have that. So who knows where it is. But yeah, good feedback.
And Mr. Marticki says, I find Franklin's final comments in the episode really revealing about his character. It's entirely understandable how frustrated, stressed, and upset he is, but his response at the end of the day is cynicism towards the rest of the world, leaving nobody but him to do good. While that's understandable, considering the circumstances, it's also just not a helpful attitude at all. And ultimately, I believe this ties into why he's using stims to try and do everything on his own rather than having a reliable aid by his side, which we discussed in that. So yeah, that's also a good point. If he says he fast forwarded through the Doctor Who intro music, that's how quickly I dove into it. Doctor Who.
Yeah, your theme that you chose is very Whovian.
Is it? Oh, okay.
Yes.
I just thought it was very.
Yeah, I thought it was funny because you have such a disdain for Doctor Who, and it's very Doctor Who.
I do like the Doctor Who theme music.
Okay,
awesome. I'll give the show that. I just don't like the Doctor Who character. Well, Karen, I don't know if I should read this. Karen still hasn't figured out that Kosh is actually Elvis Priestley.
Yeah. Yeah, and then Jesse says, "Don't tell her," and Ipsley says, "Dude, spoilers," yeah. Which I liked all of those comments.
And so there's some more comments about politics in B5, and then there's some math questions about what 100% morality rate is. But okay, and we're still getting feedback that we don't know how to pronounce Ivanova's last name, and
Ivanova. I'm getting it now.
Ivanova, yes.
Ivanova, and that's it.
Good. Karen, I sent you the emails just now, but I can read them if you want.
I can read them.
We got something from Nathan and Texas Alashon.
Awesome. So first I'll read Texas's divided loyalties. When you divide quote unquote loyalties by 2, you get loyal. If you divide it by 4, you get loy. And if you divide it by 0, you undo the laws of mathematics and probably unravel the entire space-time continuum. So don't do that. So we learn the identity of the control agent that was referenced back in A Spider in the Web. If you recall, control, and it's all in caps, identified Talia as a possible obstacle, which led to her being targeted for assassination. Why would they do that? Just said she could be a problem. Bureau 13 then decided to have her eliminated. And if control was destroyed in the process, that's just one asset. Okay. There's a reference here to what the original plan was. When Sheridan and Garibaldi are discussing who control could be, Sheridan brings up Jack, the one who shot Garibaldi in the back. Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah, his second in command. Pointing out it might have been him. That was going to be the case had Tamlin Tomita not left the show. Takashima was going to be the one who shot Garibaldi and turned out to be the control agent. The B5 faithful back in the day were already aware of this, so JMS leaned into it, putting heavy implication on Ivanova. And this, of course, forces out the real reason Susan wouldn't let a telepath into her mind under any circumstances, unless it happens to be Talia Winters. Even then, that would probably take a lot longer before Susan is willing to actually let Talia into her mind. There's some discussion on how far they actually got. My impression is not very, simply because at the end, when Susan comes for their final confrontation, Control seems to have no idea Susan has any telepathic ability whatsoever. If you recall what Talia said about telepaths making love, I don't think she would have been able to keep that hidden, but that's just my thoughts on it. As usual, I write these before you get to the episode in question, so I'm looking forward to seeing if you suspected her at all. And yes, Texas, we did not. Now you know. Several recent reviewers and reactors seem to have been caught completely by surprise at that turn of events. Now, as for Kosh, it seems he knew about the personality somehow and made a backup or something of Talia's personality, or at least that's the implication. So the question now becomes, why did he not opt to use it? I think it's because someone more suitable is present. Lita has experience with Vorlons, and she is of her own volition trying to get to Vorlon space, which might make her more suitable for their purposes. That might make one wonder why, if he's willing to show himself to her, if he's willing to show herself to her, why doesn't simply let him take her ship right to the homeworld? I think it's that she has to actually put forth the effort. All right. And see how this changes your perspective on that last scene. Pat Tallman and the guy in the Vorlon suit would be married for a few years. This is the Texas on the Shock signing off.
Nice.
And now from Nathan. Hi, Nathan.
Yes. Been a while. Glad to have you back.
Yes. And he right up front says, I wasn't writing to you because every time I return to season 2, I'm reminding that I like most of it less than season 1. Earth-centric stories are meh, and fun stories with aliens are done pretty poorly. Also, regarding the last few episodes, which are great, I suspected I wouldn't have said anything original, and I was right. Glad you've liked the second version of an episode, Babylon 5 Kills a Kid. That one is much better than the first one for my taste. Also glad that you didn't say it's an AIDS episode. Oh, yeah. This offhand remark irritates me about as much as a similar one regarding Rowling's allusion to it with werewolves. The writer gave you another example in plain speech, and you still say AIDS episode, and he's not talking to us. He's talking about in general.
Right.
I really share Karen's feelings regarding Kosh. I love Babylon 5 Wizard a lot too, and JMS teases about what's inside that suit. Have also found an eager audience in me. In my country, B5 was shown later than it came out in the US, so I had an opportunity to get spoilers and similarly had to hold myself. To Divided Loyalties, I must say I've always preferred Patricia Tallman, even though Andrea Thompson is more talented and subtle actress. I don't know. She either is not as likable or a slightly miscast as a sympathetic character. So I was glad to see Lita appearing again after the pilot. And another thing is, I'm reading people reviewing their first watch throughs of B5 on Twitter, and women, along with gays, scream sapphic energy in the first episode when Talia meets Susan at the bar, and they talk. And men invariably say they are both in robes and sleep in one bed. Did they? Huh? While watching the episode. The contrast is so funny. With regards, Nathan. Thank you, Nathan. I love hearing from you again.
Me too. That was great. Anything else we need to cover?
Nope.
All right. We will be back next week, depending on how quick. Lou's been an editing machine lately, so it may be faster than it thought, but we'll probably be back next week. As always, if someone wants to reach us, how can they reach you, Karen?
Oh, they can reach me at Oliveria on Twitter, and there's a link in my bio to my blog at which you could find a bunch of other links.
And Lou?
You can find me on YouTube at Lou's Reviews, where you'll find these video portions of the podcast, so video with a static image, I should say. Jesse does the audio version on his feed, and you'll also find my Stephen King and writers and our one-off JKLM media episodes. And on Twitter, you can find me at Lou W. Sitzmore or at S King Podcast.
And I am at Jesse Jackson DFW on Twitter. The show is jklb5podcast@gmail.com. Thank you, Lou. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, listeners. We'll be back soon. Goodbye.
Bye bye.
Bye.